Next, we're going to keep going west and we'll get to the Catskills. And so we'll hear from Sarah Coney, the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator.
Hi. Thanks everybody for coming and learning about what you guys can do to help us combat invasive species in New York. And so I guess Chris Prism's the only one that chose an aquatic invasive species. These are quagga mussels. And if you want to go next, please. Thank you. So some of these might look familiar. If anybody spent any time on a lake, you've probably seen zebra mussels. These are their cousins. They look very similar and they perform a very similar role. They're native to Defnir River in Ukraine and some other water bodies over there. And both came into the Great Lakes and have since spread pretty quickly. Zebra mussels, a lot more so than the quagga mussels. We are just starting to see these pop up in the Chris Prism. They were discovered in Otsego Lake in 2020. And I'm really happy to say that we did some surveys today looking for quagga mussels in surrounding water bodies, and we did not find any. We didn't even see zebra mussels, which is great news. So these are freshwater bivalve. They resemble marine mussels, and they are incredibly efficient filter feeders, both zebra mussels and quagga mussels. Zebra mussels, however, are restricted to hard surfaces. So as you can see that picture in the top right, they are on a boat prop. That's when many people see them attached to rocks, docks, boat props, and plants. Quagga mussels, however, have a much lighter shell, and they can actually persist in soft substrates. So whereas zebra mussels are limited to a smaller area, quagga mussels can colonize basically the entire lake. So they can colonize hard and soft substrates. And as I said, they're extremely efficient filter feeders, and they reproduce rapidly, forming large, dense colonies and just taking over the benthic habitat in a water body. And we have been seeing a lot of adaptability in quagga mussels, different forms. The one picture on the left is called the profundamorph. We're not sure what advantage it has, but we see all sorts of different variations in these quagga mussels, and they can be very ecologically and economically costly. If you want to go next. So this is Otsego Lake. This is the first place we found them in the Chris Prism. This is up by Cooperstown, if anybody knows the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is the beautiful lake that's right there. I really recommend you go visit. And so if you hit next again, Mitch. So zebra mussels have been in Otsego Lake for over a decade now, and they have been primarily restricted along the shallow edges where there's more hard habitat, hard substrates, rocks. So, I mean, that leaves a good bit of the lake open. I am a scuba diver, and I can tell you that most of Otsego Lake bottom is silty, mucky sand substrate that is no good for zebra mussels. So if you hit next. So all of a sudden we have quagga mussels in here, and they can colonize basically the entirety of the lake. And as I said, they are extremely efficient filter feeders. And since we have seen quagga mussels introduced, we have seen a huge increase in water clarity. A good day of water clarity when I was first learning to dive, I think in like 2017, was maybe 10 feet. Now it is regularly between 20 and 25 feet since the introduction of quagga mussels, which a lot of people like that clean water, but clear water is not necessarily a symptom of a healthy ecosystem. Typically, some of the most productive ecosystems, aquatic ecosystems you're seeing are those dark cloudy water. It just means there's a lot of biological activity there. And this increase in clarity is actually fueling more weed growth. A lot of invasive plants we've seen are growing a lot stronger, a lot faster, creating more recreational hazards that are difficult to boat through. They're no fun to swim through. And even some native plants are taking advantage of this water clarity and are becoming a nuisance species in Otsego Lake due to this huge increase in water clarity. So if you go next, please. And so as you can see, the range is somewhat limited. They have been here since the 1980s, but they have not spread nearly as fast as zebra mussels. Zebra mussels have spread mostly across the eastern United States, and as I've said, most water bodies, larger water bodies, have zebra mussels at this point. However, we don't believe most have quagga mussels. So what we really want to show you, and what you guys can report on IMAPs for us, is if you are looking at zebra mussels or quagga mussels. As I've said, zebra mussels are fairly common in New York State. We know they're there, but it's very easy to overlook quagga mussels because of how similar they look to zebra mussels. So next, please. So side by side, you can see how they look very similar shape, very similar size. But if we look a little bit closer, we can see that there are some differences. I don't think you can see my pointer. But if you look at the top, the zebra mussel, if you look at the lateral view, so that's the hinge is, you're holding the hinge and you're looking at it head on. You can see that the zebra mussels have a much more triangular shape to them. And if you try to stand up a zebra mussel on its base, it will stay standing. Whereas if you look at the quagga mussel below, it's much more flat in profile, much more oval-like. And if you try to stand that up, it'll fall over. So typically that's a really easy way to tell them apart. However, as I said, quagga mussels are highly adaptable, and sometimes when they're attached to hard substrates, the overall shape can more closely resemble a zebra mussel. So when we're looking at these species, we should always confirm with a secondary characteristic. So the overall shape is a really great hint as to what species it is. But if we look down here in the bottom right picture, you can see Yersinia polymorpha is the scientific name for zebra mussel, and Yersinia vigensis is quagga mussel. So as I said, they're cousins, they're in the same genus. And you can see with the zebra mussels, there's that large opening called the byssal groove where the byssus threads, that's what they use to attach to hard surfaces. That's where those come out. And so you can see this really distinctive opening. And if you look where the shells meet and continue down towards the towards the front, you can see it's a pretty straight line from that byssal groove to the end. It's pretty straight. Whereas if we look over here at the quagga mussel, there's no distinctive opening. It's very small, very hard to see. And it has a more of a curve to the shell overall. It's not a straight shot from that where that byssal groove would be over down to the end of the shell. So it's much more flush. There will be no distinctive opening when you're seeing them. Sometimes, typically the coloration in quagga mussels is lighter. However, in older zebra mussel specimens, you can see faded coloration. So coloration is not always the best ID characteristic to go on for these guys. But shape is a really great hint. And then if we just look at that, the ventral side, the bottom, look for that byssal groove, that's a really great way to confirm what it is. And you can upload pictures to iMaps that really help people ID them. If you go next, please. So, I mean, you can see from this picture, when they're side by side, they are usually somewhat easy to tell apart. So I won't have anybody chime in. Usually I have somebody chime in and answer. But you can see the zebra mussel on the left and the quagga mussel on the right. The zebra mussel is standing, the quagga mussel is fallen on its side, and you can see overall the shape difference between the two. So if you go next, please. And so the reason that quagga mussels and zebra mussels have spread so quickly is because they have a microscopic larval form that is impossible to see. So any little bit of standing water in boats, any little bit of mud could potentially be harboring quagga mussel larvae. And you wouldn't know it just from looking at it. So we highly recommend before you enter any water body, before you leave, always clean, drain, dry your boats. So there are decon stations available for public use for free throughout the region. Unfortunately, CRISP only has 2 at the moment. We are working on expanding that. But again, those are always free, operated by the watershed stewards. And so we really highly recommend you decon not just motorboats, kayaks and canoes are perfectly capable of transporting them as well. Anytime. And if you do not have access to a power washer, a decon station, we really recommend potassium chloride as an effective treatment for treating for not just invasive mussels, but for a lot of small-bodied invertebrate AIS. It's pretty cheap. You can pick up a bag at the hardware store. If you have any questions about it, please do contact me at the email I put in the chat and below. But that is one of our favorite ways to stop them. So the best thing we can do right now is prevent quagga mussels from moving outside of Otsego Lake and moving around the state. So always remember to clean, drain, dry. And thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me below or in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah.